whispers. But I also thought it might be nice to hear a story that you've probably never heard or read before. So I will say that sometimes when I speak too long and whisper, I have to, I find myself having to gulp for air. I sometimes feel like I can't breathe very well, so I'll just pre-warn you. I hope that it doesn't take away from the experience. Anyway, without further ado, kick back, and relax, and hopefully enjoy. So this book is called Inherited Sin. Chapter 1. All I'm saying is that I'm not the same as most girls my age, I told her as I tossed my legs over the side of my bed and attempted to untangle from my mass of blue and green blankets. How many other 17-year-olds do you know that purposely wake up by 5 a.m. to call their grandmothers before school every morning? There was a short pause as I heard the sound of clinking glass, and I wondered what she was up to. It wasn't rare for her to be working on something crafty before sunrise. Well now, darling, I resent that, she finally said. How many 17-year-olds have grandmothers as fabulous as yours? A smirk devoured my lips. Besides, she went on to say, apart from you, I don't think I actually know any other 17-year-olds. You know Jolie and Tatum. They've been my best friends since I was 8, I offered, but I already knew that she was right. Finding anyone like Gramps would be a difficult task in itself, but to add the close-knit relationship we had would be next to impossible. Ah, yes, the added-duty redhead and the blonde with a few loose screws, she remarked regarding my friends. I think I'd prefer to believe I don't know any than to ask those two. Grams, I tried to hold it in, but a small chuckle still escaped me. She'd never been one for discretion, but then again, it was one of the many things I admired about her. I never had to wonder what she was thinking, and despite that she had her opinions, she was always genuinely kind to everyone. I apologize. I shouldn't speak ill of your friends, she quickly replied. I just like you better. I could hear the sound of crashing pans, followed by more clinking as I stood and made my way over to the full-length mirror that hung on my wall. Well, I would hope so. I smiled back at my reflection, pulling my fingers through my long black hair before strolling over to my closet for something to wear. Anyway, the point is, I don't want the same things for my future as most young people my age, and it's not fair that I continue to have to meet with a guidance counselor about it just because at some point before graduation, she's hoping that I'll change my mind. All I know for sure is that I want something to dedicate myself to, you know? Tatum thinks I should join the Peace Corps, but I'm pretty sure they sleep outside in tents or something. What's wrong with a tent? She asked, seemingly ignoring everything else I'd said. Mosquitoes. Grams let out a hearty laugh. Well then, I believe you'll rather enjoy our trip to Europe. They don't have many mosquitoes there that I remember. Speaking of which, have you told the counselor of the trip that we have planned this summer? Surely she must understand taking some time off before college to travel, doesn't she? I rolled my eyes as I thought back to all of the exhausting conversations I'd had with the school guidance counselor in our past meetings. Yes, I've told her multiple times of our trip, and no, she doesn't understand. She says that statistics show that only 40% of students who take time off actually go back to get a college degree. Grams murmured thoughtfully. Have you tried just telling her the truth that you have no interest in college right now, and you aren't sure if you're going to be attending? I scoffed as I pulled a random green t-shirt from a hanger and tossed it over my arm. Oh, that ended up being the longest meeting of all. I pretty much missed my whole first period while she lectured me on the importance of education and the lack of opportunity for people without a degree. She basically said it was impossible to go anywhere in life without one. I beg your pardon, Grams began angrily. small town such as ours. Omni was built on the backs of farmers and factory workers with no college degrees, and if word got around that she was turning up her nose at them, well, I can't foresee her holding that position at the school for very long. I cringed while I pulled open my dresser to look for some jeans. Technically, she covered that too. She asked me if I was interested in manufacturing or agriculture before she even began talking about college degrees. She said, "There's so much opportunity for those things here." I mocked the sound of her nasally voice. Still, Gramps protested. "I find it rather insulting, not to mention presumptuous, to say people without degrees can't go anywhere. Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Edison were both primarily homeschooled without so much as a lick of formal education. Andrew Jackson, the 6th President of the United States, was also an attorney and congressman after his well-to-do ranking in the military without ever going to college. Your Grandpa Jim went straight into the military after high school, even after being accepted to the most prestigious colleges in the country. And I traveled Europe before going on to open my own art gallery in Colorado years later. I think the both of us turned out all right." She paused to let out a long sigh, and I knew that the conversation was beginning to frustrate her, much in the same way that meeting with Ms. Chavez week after week had frustrated me. "Listen, Celine, you know I support whatever decision you make for your future, but ultimately, that decision needs to be yours. No guidance counselor will be able to prepare you for what's ahead." I stopped what I was doing, frowning curiously at the sound of what she'd said. Or maybe it was the way that she'd said it. "Do you ever look back and regret your decisions?" I asked her, wondering if that's what she'd been alluding to. "I used to think I did," she said without hesitation. "Sometimes the choices we make affect other people, which in turn makes us wish we could change or alter how things happened." But honestly, if changing any of it meant not having your mother or you or Nell in my life, then I'd never change a thing. I suppose the failures and mistakes I've made should be given just as much credit for getting me where I've gotten as my successes and achievements. However, I digress. Maybe it would be best if I went up to the school and spoke with Miss Chavez. I wouldn't be able to go today, but no, Graham, really, I objected. As much as I appreciate the offer, I think Ms. Chavez, I emphasized her actual name, is pretty harmless. I was merely venting. "Of course you are, darling," she replied, "but if you change your mind." "The offer's on the table. Gotcha," I finished for her when she seemed distracted. "What are you up to, Graham? It sounds like you're putting away dishes or something." "I'm pulling some out, actually," she said as I threw the jeans and shirt I'd selected on a small stand by my door. "An old friend of mine is coming from out of town for a visit, and always appreciates a cup of tea. Unfortunately, I haven't used my kettle in quite some time, so I was rearranging a few things to get to it." "A friend from out of town," I repeated curiously, "like from Colorado?" Despite that Grams had been my best friend since I'd popped from the womb, there were obviously still parts of her life that I continued to discover. Like, for example, who her so-called out-of-town friends were, and where they came from. I'd only assumed Colorado because that was the last place she'd lived before my grandfather passed away, and she'd relocated here to Omni, Ohio with my mom, dad, and sister before I was born. "No, he's from Europe, the UK, hence the need for tea," she noted while my eyebrows raised. Your friend is a man." "Oh, come now, it's not nearly as scandalous as you make it sound. I'm a grown woman, and he is a perfect gentleman that I've known since my early 20s. "I wasn't insinuating," I replied defensively as a sudden knock sounded on my door. "I was merely surprised is all. Hold on a sec, Gramps." I put the phone down at my side and checked the door just enough to see my mother. Short, petite, and platinum blonde, her and my sister with a spitting image of each other. "Oh good, you're awake," she said as she pressed forward to plant a kiss on my cheek. persisted, throwing my head back and rolling my eyes. You know she hates me, and every time you ask me to wake her up, it always ends in a fight. She glared back at me with stern gray eyes that refused to budge. She's in her early 20s, Sal. She hates everyone. Try not to take it personally, alright? I let out a long sigh as she closed the door behind her, and I brought the phone back to my ear. Sorry about that, I said to Grams quickly. You wouldn't happen to want to give Nell a call in 30 to 45 minutes, would you? Make sure she's awake. She instantly chuckled. I learned the hard way not to phone your sister until well afternoon. She's definitely not a morning person. Well, for me, she's not much of a person at any time, so I don't blame you, I replied understandingly, grabbing up my clothes and leaving my room for the bathroom. Anyway, I should probably get going before I end up late for this meeting. I still have to get ready. Alright, but you and your mother are still planning on coming over for dinner this evening, aren't you? I'd almost forgotten about the invitation she'd extended a couple of days ago. She'd mentioned that she had something rather important to discuss, and hadn't seemed to mind that it would only be my mother and me. My father would be working late as he normally did, and my sister had an evening course at the college to attend, but she'd insisted that it wasn't meant to be a whole family affair anyway, so my mother and I had agreed. Yeah, I'll send Mom a text to remind her. Thank you, darling. We offered our goodbyes, and I proceeded to jump in the shower before getting ready, sifting through my messenger bag to find my keys, and making every attempt to mentally prepare myself for the day. Standing in front of my older sister's door would be the first task to conquer, and I took a deep breath, feeling less than confident. Even touching the knob seemed forbidden, like I was heading into a place that I didn't belong. She'd instilled that in me since we were children, screaming and scolding me if I stepped foot into her room. People always told me that would change as we grew older, that eventually we might even be friends, but I'd had yet to see the truth in that. Get out, she groaned half into her pillow when I cracked open the door. I hadn't stepped a single foot inside, and I wondered how she'd known it was me, considering she'd never be brave or stupid enough to speak to our mother that way. Sorry, I murmured a less than meaningful apology. Mom told me to wake you before I left. After that, I had no intention of sticking around. She was obviously awake and my work was done. You don't normally leave this early, she noted before I was able to pull the door closed again. A few locks of platinum hair cascaded over the side of the bed as she looked up at me, stifling a yawn. I have a meeting with Ms. Chavez, the guidance counselor. She eyed me with a curious grin. Is she still tormenting the seniors that have no hope of a future? I bit my cheek, knowing exactly what she was insinuating, and tried to remember all of the steps to not losing my temper. It was a technique I'd practiced since I was young. Grams had enrolled me in different forms of self-defense classes since I started grade school, and one of the valuable lessons they taught me was to think logically before reacting impulsively. I'd stopped attending about a year and a half ago when my life started getting busier, but everything I'd learned was still there. I suppose we can't all be conniving, money-hungry lawyers, I said with a shrug, knowing it would bother her. She'd always been proud of her chosen major, and she rarely stopped bragging to anyone that would listen about when she'd finally be taking her state bar exam. You're right, you can't, she said as she glared back at me. She turned over then, fluffing her pillow. I thought I told you to get out, she said nastily. Don't make me tell you again. I stood there for just a minute longer, letting out a sigh as I shook my head. It was almost ironic how polar opposite the conversations I'd had regarding my future were that morning. Graham had always been confident, not a doubt in her mind that I would be successful. While Nell, well, she was confident too, that I'd turn out to be a total waster, or at least that's how she made it seem. As I drove to the high school, I tried hard to really focus on what it was that I wanted for myself after graduation. I could honestly say that when Grams promised me a trip Europe with her after high school a few years back, I'd not been able to focus on much else. I knew I wanted to stay close to home, where I'd still be close to my boyfriend Van and our friends, but more school just never offered much appeal to me without knowing what the purpose of completing it was. And since I didn't have a clue what I wanted to be, it all seemed pretty pointless. By the time I arrived at the school and walked down the empty halls to the door marked guidance counselor Ms. Chauvez, I felt completely defeated. I'd taken the long way to get to her office in hopes I'd come up with something to satisfy her need to know what my future held, but I hadn't come up with a single idea that I hadn't already tried. To make matters worse, she looked less than impressed when I finally got to her office and made my way over to the vacant chair in front of her desk. "You're 20 minutes late, Miss Mosley," she informed me as she took a sip of her coffee from her coffee cup, directing her eyes to the large round clock mounted on the wall behind where I sat. She tapped her red pen impatiently on the desk in front of her, almost as if she was hoping I would say something to challenge her. I stayed quiet. "Very well then, let's get started," she began, folding her hands and resting them on the desk. "What sort of progress have you made on your future?" I had to admit, part of me was surprised that she was still even asking. After 6 different meetings over the course of the last 6 months, I had given her multiple answers and excuses, all of which she'd either seen right through or deemed unacceptable. It made me wonder how many students she'd made squirm sitting in this exact chair. How many had she forced to fill out multiple college apps and bring her the proof they'd sent them, just so that they didn't have to come back in this office again. I let out a long sigh. My patience was wearing thin. "To be honest, Miss Chauvez, I don't think you'll be happy with any response I have for you unless it ends with me showing you an acceptance or a denial letter. We've met multiple times, and I've gathered the impression that every time I try to tell you the truth, it's not good enough." She sat back in her big leather chair, looking offended and unsure how to respond, her fingers interlaced across her lap. "Miss Mosley," she breathed my name with what sounded like an exhausted sigh. "These meetings are scheduled to discuss the options for your future, and it's unfortunate that the last few times you've stepped into my office, you've treated our time together like some sort of joke." I shook my head apprehensively. "I told you from day one that I didn't have plans to go to college." "And I then asked you what you were planning to do instead," she replied. "While I admit to being biased to a college education, I'm not disapproving of alternate paths. Nonetheless, if I recall correctly, last time we met you told me that you wanted to be a nun. That is, until I told you that they also require further education as well as a dedication to a church. I asked where you'd be attending, and then you seemed to change your mind again." My eyes strayed, unable to meet her stern glare and feeling ashamed to admit that what she said was true. "I regret to inform you that you've been wasting no one's time but your own, Celine. Graduation is less than 3 weeks away, and you are one of the only students here at Omni that doesn't have a clue as to where they're going when the doors to this place close behind them. You've given me no opportunity to help you, and at this rate, if you did decide to change your mind, you've already missed any opportunity to get into the upcoming term that most colleges offer. I'm traveling to Europe with my grandmother after graduation," I told her for what felt like the 100th time. "You've mentioned that," she said. "And how long is your trip scheduled for? Is it merely a quick vacation, or are you planning to stay for a long period of time? Will you be visiting sites along the way? What countries will you visit?" I could feel my frown intensify with each question that she asked. Grams and I hadn't actually discussed that many details of the trip. In fact, we hadn't discussed any detail at all. "My grandmother has a full agenda planned, but it's a surprise," I lied, and then thought better of it. "I'm honestly not sure how long it will be for or what we're planning to do, but she lived there for a few years when she was younger, and I have a feeling she wants to show me where. used to tell me all these stories when I was a kid, and I paused, turning around at the sound of a light tapping at the door and then looking back at Miss Chavez when no one entered. I apologize, she offered as she twirled her chair to the side and rose to her feet. I don't remember having any other appointments scheduled this morning. Pardon me for just a moment. Cracking the door open to see who it was, she quickly excused herself from the room before I heard muffled voices behind the blurred glass. They rose and fell, and even though I couldn't make out the words, Miss Chavez was quick to return. I'm afraid we'll have to continue this at a later time, Celine, she told me. Grab your things. Her eyes looked sad as she motioned her head to the hallway, watching me as I picked up my messenger bag I dropped on the floor next to the chair. Is everything all right? I wondered aloud. I hope it will be, she replied sincerely when I walked past her and into the hall. I let my eyes drift from Miss Chavez to the familiar woman pacing diligently back and forth by the lockers, still freshly pressed in work attire. Mom. Whatever had brought her to the school had to be pretty bad, as Elena Mosley had never been the type of woman to take time from her busy schedule of clients unless it was a fairly important emergency. What happened? I asked, racing to where she stood. Her face was white as a sheet, and her cheeks were stained with tears. The hands she extended out to me were tightly gripped onto what looked like the entire contents of a Kleenex box, and she pulled me close into a death grip hug. Are Dad and Nell okay? I swallowed hard, afraid to hear the answer. It's Graham, Sal, she whispered faintly, trying hard not to choke on the words. Confusion instantly set in. I'd spoken to her less than 3 hours ago, and I couldn't see how having tea with a friend in the comfort of her own home would somehow result in my mother ending up here. What do you mean? I pressed as I pulled back from her arms. What about her? She's in the hospital, she sniffled. The second that she said it, my stomach relocated to my throat. What? Why? I couldn't think straight, and there was some part of me that suddenly grew angry and wanted to shake my mother to tell her to stop crying and tell me what was going on. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't breathe. She fell. My mother sniffled, offering little bits and pieces of information through her sobs. The doctors say there's a bleed in her brain. Is she gonna be okay? I asked as I fought against the illusion of the room slowly closing in on me. How did this happen? My mother slowly shook her head as my temples started to throb, and I silently breathed in short gasps of air. Her brain is hemorrhaging, baby. She doesn't have much time. I held my breath, swallowed, and blinked, all before I collapsed. I was oblivious to the pain that shot through my legs when my knees hit the hard floor because, for a moment, I was completely convinced that my world had stopped. It felt like every bit of my insides were dying a slow and painful death. I couldn't move or grab at the spots that hurt to try and ease the pain, and all I wanted was to just look up, open my mouth, and scream at the top of my lungs in hopes that it would all come out. But I couldn't do anything. I'd never felt more helpless in all of my life, and I hated it. I could hear my mother's incessant ringtone chiming over and over in my ears until finally she answered it. Yeah, I'm with her now. We'll be there soon, she told the caller as she grabbed for my arm and hung up the phone. We have to get to the hospital, Sal, before it's too late. That, my friend, is the end of chapter 1. I hope